Before you judge me for cutting my parents out of my wedding, hear the whole story. Because by the end, you'll understand why the people who were supposed to protect me became the ones trying to destroy the happiest day of my life. My name is Sarah Matthews, and I'm 29 years old. 6 weeks before my wedding, my mother called while I was coordinating emergency supplies for 3 wildfire evacuation centers near Seattle. She didn't ask if I was safe or how the wedding preparations were going. Instead, she simply said, "Your wedding can wait. Your sister's engagement party is more important right now. Your mother made her announcement, but that didn't mean it was your decision." Victoria had been dating commercial real estate broker Mason Cole for 9 months. 3 weeks earlier, he proposed during a sponsored weekend in Napa. The proposal video reached over 2 million views, and Victoria immediately started planning an extravagant engagement celebration at a glass venue overlooking Lake Washington. Complete with brand sponsors, photographers, luxury floral displays, and a guest list chosen partly for social media influence. Her preferred date was the Saturday before my wedding. That was inconvenient but still manageable. Then my mother decided Victoria should use the same event planner, florist, photographer, and even relatives who were already committed to my wedding. She also wanted my rehearsal dinner moved because Victoria's sponsor wanted exclusive family access that weekend. This wasn't a coincidence. Victoria had intentionally planned her event around my wedding. "Why?" Elliot asked. "Because to Victoria, attention equals love," I replied. And my mother has spent her entire life making sure she never runs out of either. My phone buzzed. My father had texted, "Your mother is upset. Call and apologize before this becomes embarrassing." Elliot read the message and looked at me. "What happens if you don't apologize? They'll escalate. Then let them." That night, I reviewed every wedding contract. The venue, catering, photography, transportation, and guest accommodations had all been paid for through accounts my family couldn't access. For the first time, their disapproval couldn't cancel my wedding. It could only expose them. At 1:13 a.m., my mother sent another message. "We've already started making changes. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I read it 3 times, opened my laptop, and created a folder called Wedding Interference. The next morning, I realized she hadn't been bluffing. At 8:07 a.m., our florist called while I was reviewing wildfire road closures. "Sarah, I just wanted to confirm that you approved the reduction." "What reduction?" She explained that my mother had requested the ceremony arch and aisle flowers be transferred to another family event, saying I wanted a simpler setup because I was overwhelmed with work. She had signed the email mother of the bride and family event coordinator. Attached beneath it was Victoria's engagement order. It was almost identical to mine, the same white orchids. The same hanging greenery, the same candle arrangements, the same entrance installation. Victoria wasn't just trying to outshine my wedding. She planned to copy my entire design and post it online first. I immediately secured the florist account with a password and requested copies of every email. By noon, the hotel handling our guest block called because someone claiming to represent my family had tried to move 6 relatives closer to Victoria's venue. At 2:00 p.m., our photographer forwarded an offer from Victoria, promising extra payment if he left my rehearsal dinner early to photograph her cocktail reception. At 4:00 p.m., my aunt sent an updated itinerary. My rehearsal had been labeled optional Sarah activity. Victoria's engagement brunch was listed as the primary family celebration. I didn't cry. I documented everything. Working in emergency management had taught me that when systems fail, assumptions are useless. You need names, timestamps, instructions. And the exact moment a preventable problem turns into a crisis. By that evening, my folder contained 17 screenshots, 4 emails, 2 voicemails, and the revised itinerary. Elliot found me sitting at the dining table surrounded by paperwork. "You look like you're building a federal case. I'm preparing for my mother to deny all of this." He picked up the itinerary. Optional Sarah activity. My father wrote that. He always uses calibri and underlines whatever he thinks is important. Elliot sat beside me, no longer smiling. "Your father's company contacted Atlas again today. Whitmore Civic Development was my father's consulting firm. For over a year, he'd been pursuing a partnership with a technology company because new city infrastructure contracts increasingly required real-time emergency coordination systems. He talked about the opportunity constantly, he just never mentioned the company's name. He has submitted 3 proposals to Atlas, Elliot said. My stomach tightened. Does he know you founded it? No. The proposals went through our partnerships division. Were you considering him? His company has useful experience, but reviewers noted concerns about billing practices and staff turnover. I pushed the papers away. I don't want our family conflict affecting your business. It won't, but their behavior may reveal how they operate when they believe the person in front of them has no power. I hated that he was right. My parents had ignored Elliot because they believed he could offer them nothing. They interrupted him, mocked his career, and once moved him to the end of a charity dinner table so a wealthy developer could sit beside Victoria. They judged people by usefulness. They had simply miscalculated his. That evening my mother texted, "Family meeting tomorrow at 5, no excuses, bring Elliot if he insists on being involved." I almost declined, but my aunt called and said my mother had told relatives I was suffering an emotional breakdown from wedding pressure. She said Victoria tried to simplify things, but you became territorial, my aunt explained. Did she mention contacting my vendors? No. Or moving hotel reservations? No. Then tomorrow they can explain everything in front of witnesses. After the call, I asked Elliot to attend but not reveal who he was. I need to hear what they say while they still believe you don't matter. He studied me, then nodded. That sounds like an emergency coordinator talking. I'm finished walking into family disasters without a map. I told my mother we would attend. She replied immediately, "Good. Victoria has been under terrible stress because of you." I thought about all the years I had moved my chair so my sister could occupy the center of every photograph. This time my chair belonged to a table I had built myself, and nobody was moving it. My parents held the meeting at my mother's event design studio, a converted warehouse where she created installations for corporate galas. The conference room had been arranged like a business presentation. Bottled water sat at every seat. An agenda rested before my father, and fabric samples lay beside my mother as though we were choosing colors rather than discussing her attempt to dismantle my wedding. Victoria was already there in a cream cashmere dress, her phone face down and her makeup arranged to make her swollen eyes look natural. Mason sat beside her, visibly uneasy. My father pointed to 2 chairs. "Sit down. We need to resolve this before Sarah damages the family. Not before they damaged me, before I damaged them by refusing to cooperate." Victoria's engagement creates a valuable opportunity, he began. Her partnerships provide exposure for your mother's studio and perhaps my firm. Sarah's wedding is private and does not create the same broader value. I stared at him. Did you just rank our celebrations by marketing exposure? That emotional reaction is exactly what we're trying to avoid, Victoria sighed. Nobody is saying your wedding doesn't matter. You labeled my rehearsal optional. Dad did that. My father called the itinerary practical. My mother leaned toward me. Victoria's sponsors have fixed dates. Your ceremony is flexible. My venue has been reserved for 11 months. The people who love you would understand if you moved it. Would Victoria move her party? Silence filled the room. That is different, Victoria said. Why? Because contracts are attached to it. So are mine. Yours are personal. Mine affect my business. There it was. My wedding was personal, therefore disposable. Victoria's event generated money, therefore sacred. I placed the florist email, hotel request, photographer's message, and revised itinerary on the table. Let's discuss business. My mother's face tightened. You had no authority to contact my vendors, I said. I was making the weekend work. You claimed I authorized you. You were unavailable. I was helping evacuate families from wildfires and Victoria was panicking. Even Mason looked down at the absurd comparison. My father tapped the table. Your mother was helping. She impersonated my representative. Don't use dramatic language. It is accurate language. Victoria shoved back her chair. Sarah has always resented me. I turned to her. I don't resent you for being loved. I resent that you require everyone else to become smaller so you can feel important. You copied my flowers, tried to take my photographer, and moved relatives from my hotel. None of that was necessary. Tears filled her eyes and my mother immediately took her hand. Look what you're doing to her. That sentence carried me through 2 decades. Victoria crying after taking my graduation dress, crashing my car, or expecting me to finish her assignments. Her tears had always been treated as evidence of my guilt. This time I asked one question. Did you offer my photographer extra money to abandon my rehearsal? It was a scheduling discussion. Did you know he was contracted to me? She looked toward our father. Mason spoke quietly. Answer her. Victoria stared at him. Why are you taking her side? I'm asking whether it's true. She folded her arms, answering without words. Mason moved his chair away. My mother panicked. This is why we wanted privacy. Elliot, perhaps you don't understand how close families operate. Sometimes one person must compromise. Elliot remained calm. Which person? She blinked. Excuse me, which person is always asked to compromise? That is unfair. Then name one significant thing. Victoria surrendered for Sarah. My father's face re-ended. You're not married to her yet. This is a family discussion. I am the person marrying her. Your attempt to interfere concerns me. My father gave him the same dismissive smile he used on junior employees. Marriage requires more than supporting Sarah's emotional reactions. It requires stability and the ability to provide. My mother added, we've had concerns about your career. What concerns? Elliot asked. You call yourself a technology consultant. She said that can mean anything. Victoria lifted her chin. I searched for you. There was no meaningful professional profile, no company page, and barely any social media presence for someone marrying into this family. That seemed strange. My father opened a folder and made an offer. Delay the wedding by 6 months. Let us evaluate whether Elliot is financially realistic and will help pay for a new ceremony. You never offered to pay for this one, I replied. Because you rushed into it without consulting us, he said. I've been engaged for 14 months. My mother's voice grew sharper. Why are you so determined to make us your enemies? Without responding. I placed one final page on the table, a transcript of a voicemail my mother had accidentally left after thinking she had ended the call. Victoria's voice came first. If Sarah refuses to move the date, tell the relatives she's unstable. Nobody wants to travel for a bride who's having a breakdown. Then my mother's voice followed. We only need enough people to cancel so the venue looks embarrassing. She'll postpone once she realizes half the family isn't coming. The room went completely silent. Victoria stopped crying. Mason slowly stood up. Is that real? Victoria grabbed his wrist. Sit down. He pulled away. My father reached for the paper, but I pulled it back. You weren't trying to coordinate 2 celebrations, I said. You were trying to sabotage mine. My mother stared at the transcript. It was taken out of context. Elliot looked at her, his expression hard. What kind of context makes that acceptable? My father began collecting his papers. This meeting is over. The meeting you planned is over, I replied. Mine is just beginning. I informed them that every vendor account had been secured. Every relative would receive the correct information, and any further interference would be documented by our attorney. My mother looked horrified. You'd threaten your own family. I'm explaining that impersonation and contract interference have consequences. Victoria let out a bitter laugh. She thinks she's powerful because her boyfriend found a lawyer. Elliot calmly looked at her. They Googled the wrong Elliot Reed. My father's expression changed instantly, not with recognition but calculation. What does that mean? Elliot opened a page on his phone and placed it on the table. It showed the Atlas Response Systems leadership page, featuring an older photo of him standing beside a mobile command vehicle, clean-shaven and wearing glasses. Beneath it were the words, Elliot Reed, founder and executive chairman. Victoria immediately searched his name on her own phone. My mother looked at my father. Atlas Response Systems, he didn't answer. The color had drained from his face. Atlas wasn't a household name, but in emergency management, hospital coordination, government contracting, and critical infrastructure, it was a giant. Its technology operated across 37 states, and the company carried a private valuation of more than $4 billion. More importantly to my father, Atlas was selecting regional partners for a national infrastructure program, and Whitmore Civic Development had already applied 3 times. You're that Elliot Reed, my father whispered. The same man whose career your family called meaningless, Elliot replied. My mother recovered quickly. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked, Elliot answered. You asked whether I had a real job. You asked Sarah whether I earned enough to afford a mortgage. You asked me to move my car because you assumed I was a delivery driver. You never asked what I built or why my work mattered. My father ignored that. Did you know my company applied? I found out yesterday. He looked at me suspiciously. Sarah knew, not until yesterday. My mother's attitude changed almost instantly. Only 10 minutes earlier, Elliot had been an irresponsible choice. Now she smiled warmly. Perhaps we were just being protective, parents worry. Sarah has always been independent, and sometimes we forget how strongly she reacts. I stared at her. She was blaming my sensitivity while trying to impress the same man she had just insulted. Victoria laughed bitterly, so this was some kind of test. You let us sit here without telling us who he really was. I simply allowed you to show how you treat someone when you think they have nothing to offer, I said. My father called it manipulative. Elliot shook his head. I've always used my legal name. I value my privacy. Your lack of curiosity isn't the same as deception. Mason remained near the door. Would knowing who he was have changed how you treated him? He asked Victoria. She didn't answer. My father tried to separate business from family. Elliot nodded. For business purposes, I agree. Relief briefly crossed my father's face. Then Elliot added, which is exactly why I won't interfere with the independent review of your company. My father's shoulders tensed. However, the review team requested information regarding leadership ethics and contract conduct. Sarah's evidence raises legitimate concerns. You'd submit private family emails, my father demanded. I don't have to. Your proposal already includes misleading claims about family access to regional decision makers. It suggests Sarah's emergency management relationships can support your contracts. I looked directly at my father. You used my professional network without my permission. It was only a general reference. We're family. No, I replied. You're a consultant who listed my public service relationships as a commercial asset. Elliot opened another page. Your proposal also describes Whitmore Civic Development as a family-led organization built on transparency and accountability. I couldn't help laughing once. My mother stood up. That's enough. We came here to solve a wedding problem, not destroy Gregory's business. You were prepared to destroy my wedding, I replied. What's the difference? His business supports employees. My wedding represents my family too. She slowly turned to look at Elliot. People say things under stress. I understand stress, he replied. I also understand patterns. Victoria accused me of hating her success. I reminded her that I had organized her first brand events, recovered missing inventory, and lent her $18,000 to launch her studio. She had repaid only $2,500. Mason looked stunned because Victoria had told him our parents funded everything. Sarah is humiliating me before my engagement party. She cried, no, I am telling the truth because all of you built your plans around my silence. My father stood. We are leaving. Before he reached the door, Elliot said, your Atlas review meeting was scheduled for Tuesday. It has been canceled. My father stopped. The compliance team found inconsistencies before tonight. Unauthorized use of Sarah's affiliations confirmed the need for formal review. You said you would stay separate. I did. The compliance department made the decision. My father stared at me with fury. You did this. I did not write your proposal, misrepresent access, or teach you to value people according to what they could give you. Then every phone on the table began vibrating. Victoria checked hers and went pale. Mason had sent the voicemail transcript to his parents, the people financing the engagement party. The consequences arrived as a series of doors closing. Mason's parents withdrew their contribution that night. They did not object to an elaborate engagement celebration. They objected to funding an event constructed by sabotaging my wedding. The botanical venue required another payment by noon, and Victoria could not cover it alone. My mother offered to use her studio's business credit, but my father refused because his firm's accounts had been temporarily restricted during an internal audit triggered by the Atlas compliance review. The audit was not Elliot's revenge. It resulted from financial choices my father had made long before our confrontation. By morning, 2 sponsors had withdrawn from Victoria's party. One was a stationery company that had seen proof she tried to redirect my vendors. Another was a family-oriented home brand, unwilling to appear in what its representative called an unresolved ethical dispute. Victoria posted a video about jealous relatives sabotaging women during important milestones. For 20 minutes, people believed her. Then Mason ended their engagement. He did it privately, but Victoria announced it publicly, claiming he had failed to defend her from a toxic family member. Mason responded with one sentence. I ended the engagement after learning that the celebration was organized through deception and deliberate harm to another person. His statement spread faster than anything Victoria had posted. My voicemail filled with apologies, gossip, and sudden concern from relatives who had ignored me for years. I answered almost none of them. My mother called 34 times. My father sent 3 emails. The first accused me of destroying the family. The second demanded that Elliot restore the partnership review. The third offered a compromise. If Elliot reopened the meeting, my parents would attend my wedding and persuade relatives to come. They still believed their presence was valuable enough to purchase my obedience. I forwarded the email to Elliot, who replied from the next room, "That may be the least persuasive negotiation I have ever seen." 2 days later, my mother arrived without warning. She pushed past me when I opened the apartment door. "You need to fix this." No greeting, no apology. "What exactly?" I asked. "Victoria lost her engagement. Her sponsors are leaving. Your father's company may lose its biggest opportunity. Relatives refuse to speak to us." She turned to Elliot. "You have made your point." "I have made no public statement," he replied. "You canceled Gregory's meeting. The compliance department canceled it. You own the company. I also employ people responsible for preventing unethical partnerships." She looked back at me. "Tell him to stop. Did you come here to apologize?" "I came because this has gone too far." "That is not an apology. Your sister's life is collapsing." "My wedding was 6 weeks away when you tried to empty it." "You always do this," she said. "You keep records and repeat exact words until everyone feels like a criminal." Exact words are inconvenient when people want to rewrite history. Finally, she admitted that she feared Victoria's moment would disappear. "She needs attention in a way you don't." My mother said, "So you punished me because I appeared strong enough to survive it." She sat down. "When you were young, Victoria was anxious. She needed reassurance. You were capable. Teachers praised you. You knew what you wanted, so you decided I needed nothing. I thought you understood. I understood that love went to whoever created the largest emergency." She glanced at Elliot. "Now you have someone powerful protecting you." "No, I have someone who respects me. It feels powerful because you never did." Her eyes filled with tears, but I did not rush to comfort her. "I am your mother," she whispered. "Yes, how can you exclude me from the wedding? The same way you tried to exclude my wedding from the family. I made a mistake. You made a plan. You contacted vendors, moved guests, recruited relatives, and prepared lies about my mental health." She asked what I wanted. I required a written correction to every relative she misled, an acknowledgement that I did not cause Victoria's breakup or my father's audit, and a promise that both parents would stay away from the wedding. "People will talk," she said. "They already are. I'll look like a terrible mother." "Is that really your biggest concern?" I asked. As she reached the door, she accused me of enjoying her pain and thinking I was better than her because I was marrying a wealthy man. "I agreed to marry Elliot before I had any idea how much his company was worth," I replied. "You dismissed him because you assumed he didn't have money. So which one of us is really judging people by their wealth?" She had no answer. 3 days later, she sent a written statement admitting that I had never approved any wedding changes and that the rumors about my emotional state were completely false. My father never apologized. Instead, he contacted the Atlas board chairman, who forwarded his message to the compliance department. Whitmore Civic Development was quietly removed from partnership consideration. A week before Victoria's canceled engagement party, my parents hosted a smaller family dinner at my mother's studio. They set the table for 30 guests, but only 6 people showed up. Someone sent me a photo of my parents and Victoria sitting among rows of empty chairs beneath floral arrangements copied from my wedding plans. For a moment, I felt satisfied. Then I realized something deeper. They had created the exact scene they had wanted for me, a celebration made empty by their own choices. I hadn't ruined it. I had simply stopped protecting them from the consequences of their actions. On the morning of my wedding, my mother left one final voicemail. "I understand we're not invited," she said. "I just hope that one day you'll remember families are supposed to forgive." I listened to it once, then deleted it. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean giving someone access to your life again. Elliot and I were married in a beautifully restored ferry terminal overlooking Puget Sound. We chose it because it had once carried people from one shore to another. That felt symbolic of the life we were beginning together. We reduced our guest list from 160 to 84. The smaller room didn't feel empty, it felt honest. My aunt helped fasten my dress. My coworkers brought coffee before sunrise, and our florist recreated the ceremony using cedar, white anemones, and storm-fallen maple gathered near our first apartment. Nothing came from Victoria's canceled event. Nothing was designed for social media. When I walked down the aisle, I walked alone, not because no one loved me enough to walk beside me, but because I wanted those first steps to belong entirely to me. Elliot waited near the windows. He didn't look like a billionaire founder or the man whose name had frightened my parents after one online search. He looked like the man who had always asked what I wanted before telling me what he thought I should do. During his vows, he said, "I will never ask you to make yourself smaller just to prove you love me." That was the moment I cried. After the ceremony, no one questioned why my parents weren't there. The people who truly mattered already knew the truth, and everyone else understood that a wedding isn't a courtroom where the bride has to explain every empty chair. Months later, my father's company survived its audit but lost several important contracts. Investigators found no criminal fraud, but they did uncover inaccurate reporting and weak financial controls. He was forced to restructure the company and step away from overseeing proposals. My mother's studio stayed open, although several clients left after discovering she had used business resources to interfere with my wedding. Victoria disappeared from social media for 4 months. When she finally returned, her content was quieter and far less attention-seeking. She never apologized directly. On my birthday, she sent one message. I didn't realize how much everyone protected me from the consequences of my actions. I read it but didn't reply. Maybe it was the beginning of real self-awareness. Maybe it was just another attempt to reopen a door without accepting responsibility. Either way, I was no longer responsible for her growth. My parents remain outside my life. That may change one day. But reconciliation will require more than tears, promises, and speeches about family. It will require accountability, lasting change, and respect for boundaries they once treated as insults. The biggest lesson I learned is that self-respect is not revenge. Revenge would have meant using Elliot's influence to destroy my father's company, publicly humiliating Victoria, or turning my wedding into a performance to prove I had won. I did none of those things. I simply told the truth, protected what belonged to me, and allowed adults to live with the consequences of their own decisions. Toxic families often call that cruelty because they're used to one person carrying everyone else's burden. For years, I believed being dependable meant carrying whatever my family dropped: debts, emergencies, lies, disappointments, and shame. I thought strength meant hiding my pain so no one else would be inconvenienced. I was wrong. Real strength is knowing when it's time to put the weight down. The most valuable lessons don't always come from schools or books. Sometimes they come from recognizing unhealthy patterns, learning healthy boundaries, and realizing that love without respect eventually becomes control. My mother chose Victoria's engagement over my wedding because she believed I would eventually give in. My father called my wedding just a party because he believed his approval gave it value. They searched my husband's name online and realized they had completely misjudged him, but their biggest mistake happened long before that. They had misjudged me. They believed I would always move aside so someone else could stand in the spotlight. On my wedding day, surrounded by people who never expected me to disappear in order to belong, I realized I didn't need a better seat at my parents' table. I simply needed the courage to leave it. Have you ever been called selfish just because you stopped accepting unfair treatment? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might give someone else the courage to set healthy boundaries. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. This story is completely fictional and created for entertainment, education, and reflection. We hope its message stays with you. No matter what betrayal, disappointment, or unfair treatment you've experienced, you always have the right to protect your peace, rebuild your life, and create a future where your worth is never determined by the wrong people.